If you've ever set up a task management system and then failed to use it, you are not alone. I cannot tell you how many different systems I've tried over the years. Today, we're starting a 3-part series where I'll show you the exact Notion task management system that I use and the one that finally stuck. I'll also reveal a couple of unique task management principles that I developed that changed everything for me. So if you're ready to finally take control of your task list, let's get started. Alrighty, so as I mentioned in the intro, this is a 3-part series where I'm going to cover this setup of the task management system that you see on the screen. This is my live system, the one that I use day in and day out. It's kind of a mess, and I let it become kind of a mess so I could clean it up for you to show you how it works. And then we're going to go through and we're going to build it from scratch. So I'm going to give you a short tour, and then I'll walk you through how to build each part of it. If you don't want to be bothered building it yourself, I'd recommend that you stick around for the tour. And then you can go download the finished, cleaned up version that we're going to build by going to queerefficiency.com/todo. That's one word, TODO. You can grab the free version. There's also the pro version that you can grab from me. As a reminder, some Notion automations require a paid plan, but if you get the pro version from me, that will come with it and you don't have to worry about a paid plan. Everything will be baked in for you. So let's look at this now. This is my live system. There's stuff everywhere. But what I'm going to do is walk you through basically how I would sit at my computer and process this list. As I said, this is quite a long list of items. Obviously, I'm not going to do all this stuff today, but I wanted to show you how quickly I'd be able to get through my task list. Now, I let it get pretty messy. I'm missing some tags and I'm missing some areas. I'll talk about those in just a second. So I'm going to go through and I'll add all of that. But once I have my context, which will only take a couple minutes to add, then zipping through the task list to decide what to do today or not today, which is one of my little unique principles I mentioned, zipping through my task list becomes quite effortless. My method involves 2 key steps. The first is categorize, and then the second is sort. So in categorize, I mentioned already, we have areas and tags. I've gone through a whole bunch of different systems. I've played around with getting things done. I've played around with Para, things like that. And what I found is they all kind of converge around a couple similar ideas. The first is to categorize your tasks into an overall area. The major areas for most people would be things like personal and work. Those are the major domains that most folks have in their life. Now, I also have queer efficiency, so that's another domain or area that I have in my life. I have a coworker who works in the theater as a side project, and theater would be a whole thing for him. It's pretty unlikely that you have a task that falls into more than one of those areas simultaneously. This helps you quickly sort things. So if you need to contextualize, like you sat at your desk for work and now you want to see all of your tasks for work, you can do that really quickly at a glance. So that's area. It's a major life area, and typically tasks only fall into one of those. Then I recommend that you add tags. This is context. It's things that allow you to describe or find things later on. This is something Notion is really great at, and you can sort things and filter things by context or by tag. And you can see that I have a bunch of tags here. Let me click into this dropdown, and you can see I have a number of tags listed here. And this thing grows all the time. The tag list gets bigger and bigger. And as I find things need to be combined or separated, I'll adjust the tags as I go. Items in your task list can fall into multiple tags. I find that most of mine typically fall just into one, but they could fall into multiple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward this really fast. I'm going to go through and I'm going to categorize all the items in my list, and then I'll talk to you quickly and show you the second step in the method, which is to sort them. All right, I've got all the items grouped into their individual areas, and then I'm going to go through and add some context when necessary. Not every item needs a tag, and some of mine in my list definitely won't need them. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to put those in really quickly. Okay, I've got all my items categorized now that need context. I will say that I find, for me, that I tend not to use the context so much for queer efficiency or for work. I tend to find that it's mostly for personal, but that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. I will say that my coworker I was talking to today was talking about his system, and he has things for finance and for operations. He has different contexts for work, and so you can categorize things any way that makes sense to you. The point is just that you do it enough so that it becomes useful. Okay, So that's the first part of the system. It's pretty simple, categorizing the items that are on your task list. Now, the second item is a strategy that really changes things for me, and I'm going to help you build this. It allows you to effortlessly answer the question today or not today. That's the only question you really need to be thinking about. And then there's a couple sub-questions from each one. If you answered today, you'll go back through those items and decide, am I going to do this today or is this a maybe item? If you answer not today, then the question you ask is, do I care when this comes back? If yes, then I will use my snooze column. And if no, then I'll just hit my later button and those function differently. The later button snoozes an item and it will show back up in this system, which again, I'm going to show you how to build all this. Hitting later and what will eventually be relabeled to not today. I'm actually going to change that. In fact, let me do that really quickly, because that wording is better. And I will say this property should be snooze. When I click not today, there's a formula behind it that randomly assigns it to between 1 and 7 days to show back up in my list. That is one of the most helpful things that I have ever built into a task management system. Basically, shoos it away with the reassurance that it will come back, and I can always go look to find it in the snoozed view here, so I can quickly dismiss it. But if I know I need it either in a couple days or if I need to see it again on a specific day, I have this fancy column set up that has these options that I can quickly choose from. So I can tell it, I want to see this on Monday, and it will always pick the following day. It's not going to pick today. So for instance, today is Wednesday. If I choose this now, it will schedule it out for the next 7 days from today. Or if I know, oh, I need this to come back in 3 days, just having the flexibility to quickly pick those options, that makes all the difference in sorting your work. So let's go through this. I'm not going to refill the propane, but that's something I might want to do this weekend. So let me change that to Saturday. And you'll see it immediately disappears. And then what happens is it pops into the snooze view, and you'll see that it assigned October 4th. Today is the 1st, October 4th is Saturday. And then the system will bring it back into the main view that day. Setting up the spool on my 3D printer, don't know, not today. I'm not refinishing those tables. I'm not building a grocery manager. I am not going to do battery testing. This is going to happen on Monday. This is where this is helpful. Again, I can pick a day. I know that I'm going to be emailing her on Monday. This item is a resource. So this is a document I found online. And this is one other thing I will say that's a little bit of a unique twist in this system, is that I have a quick method for assigning this as a resource. If I come into the status and hit resource, what that does is it shoos the item out of my list, but then it lives in the tags view permanently. So I can go back and reference it, or I can search for it. So if I'm looking for all those software items, I can see all these things on software that I'm looking for. So it's a quick filing system. If I need to shoo it away, I set it to resource. This I've actually completed, so I can hit done on that. This is a resource. These are not today. I'm not going to do those now. I don't even remember what this means. So now I have the option here to hit canceled. Sometimes that's handy, but this one I don't need to really keep it. So I can just delete it out of the system. Already ordered the pink dice. This I might work on this weekend, so I'm going to have that come back on Friday. Already paid the Old Navy card. And then these are all work tasks. So what I have built is a button that allows me to snooze all of my work tasks in bulk. So this is handy on a Saturday or a Sunday when you're working on your stuff. I don't need to see any of those, so I can just have them all snooze and they'll all come back on Monday. Not doing this, not working on that, not this. This is already in progress, but it's going to, just as a reminder. And then I have a number of query efficiency tasks. So I know I'm not doing this today, not today. This is today. This I finished. This would be tomorrow. It would be Thursday. So yeah, tomorrow. Either way works. So with this, I might have gotten 2 of those, but that's okay. I'm going to mark that there. And then that's not until January. So I could really come in here and I could snooze this way out by picking a snooze date. Now, I don't have this shown here, apparently. So I want to come in here and I can set this manually. This is something that I can build into a better view, but I can set that to come back January 1st because I know I don't need it right now. And there we go. It was very fast. I was able to get through all of those and explain them to you in under 5 minutes. And now I have just this item. If I had any others that were under here for today, I could quickly choose maybe to drop them down if I knew I wasn't going to work on them today. One last thing in this view, I have this done section, and I know that these are done, and I like to keep them consolidated until I'm ready to not see them anymore. So once these are done, I can hit archive and they'll all go away. Now they don't get deleted, they just get filtered out so I don't have to look at them anymore. So that is my task management system in a nutshell. And we're going to start work on building this this very similar, more cleaned up and refined system right now. Alrighty, so I'm in a blank document in Notion called Task Manager. Again, remember, you can get the final versions of these by going to queerefficiency.com/to-do if you just want to download it, if you don't feel like building this yourself. But if you'd like to build it yourself, then stick with me because we're going to go through all this, and you can pick up some Notion skills as we go. So the first thing I know I'm going to need to do, we need this to be full screen. I can already tell just by where this is positioned that there are these columns, and so I need this to be full screen. And then I know that I'm going to have those buttons in those columns. So as we looked at this one, I have this column here and then this column here. Now, I've learned that I actually like it better for a couple reasons with the database on the left and those buttons on the right. So we're going to build it that way. We're going to type slash and then column and hit 2 columns. And then we'll type slash and then database inline, and that will pull in the database. And then I, for my sections, like this styling for them. So I'm going to enter that title with spaces between. If I have a space in the word, so if I were to say new database, I would have 1 space between each letter and then 3 between each word. But in this case, I just want to say actions. Sometimes it's hard to type. Then enter, and then hyphen, hyphen, hyphen inserts that line. And then I typically like this is minimal, but I typically like it to be gray. It helps it kind of fade into the background a little more. And then I'm going to insert an empty button here. It's not going to do anything yet, but we'll say start today. For now, we're just going to leave it empty, and I'm going to give it the play icon and a green and just hit done. And it's going to yell at me. That's okay. We're not going to build that just yet. But this button will allow us to unsnooze all of our items. That's how that works in the background. You can do it manually by clicking this button, or if you're up on the pro version or have a paid plan and you want to set this up, you can build an automation on the database that runs daily and does it for you, which we will do. So I'm going to drag this column pretty tight so it's tiny, and I have more space over here. And then I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to come to the title and enter, and then paste that in, and it's okay. It didn't paste into the column, so I'm going to drag it into the column so that way it lives there. And then I'll just say database. And then I want to give the actual database itself a name. So we're going to say Task Manager Database. This is a best practice of mine. I always like to put the word database on databases, because if I left it as Task Manager and it matches the title of the page, which it does in this case, it's sometimes hard to spot when you're selecting it for other integrations and things like that. So I'm going to leave database there, but then I'm going to hide this title because we don't need to see it. So now we're going to set up the properties. The first one, I'm going to change it, and rather than calling it task, I'm going to call it item. The reason for that is you saw that I have resources that come in here. They're not just tasks. They're not just work to do. Sometimes it's just things to remember. So I'm going to call it item. And then we need a few other of the properties that we talked about. So the first one we'll create is a single select. This is for our areas. And then I like to use the folder icon, which I actually can see right here for that. The next we'll do a multi-select because this is the tags property, and we can choose if we want more than one, and we'll search for tag and we'll give it that icon. The next property that we need a status property. And we know from what we saw before that we have a few additional statuses to add. So we're going to edit this, and we'll choose under the in progress. We know that we need a maybe status, and we're going to update in progress to today. And then under done, we need to have a couple things here. We need archived, we need canceled, and canceled can be 1 L's or 2. I typically spell it with 1. And then resource. Those are where those go. So we'll put done up top, archived, resource, and canceled. So we'll change archived to gray, resource to brown, and canceled to red. And then for maybe, I guess we can give it purple just to make it a little different. And I think I'm going to put today next, so that way this is the order they show up in when we group things. And just to reiterate the difference between done and archived, done allows me to keep things kind of held in a view so I can continue to see them until I'm ready to banish them to the back end of my system and not see them anymore. that's when I would change them to archived. I know a lot of folks love to delete emails. I do not recommend that you do that. This is a tangent. I'm going to get on here's my little soapbox. I'm going to step on it. If people are still using the delete button in your email, you should stop. For anything, there's no reason to delete email. There's so much storage space. Unless you genuinely are out of storage space, which most people are not, use the archive button. You can reference things, but they still get out of your face. Anyway, okay, I'm going to put my little soapbox back down. Okay, I stepped down. Everything is fine. I definitely recommend that folks do not delete things, but rather archive them when you no longer want to see them. So that's what the difference is there. Then what I want to add, this is just a little handy thing. I like to have a created time property, which we're going to hide. And this helps when we add our all items view, which is where you'll be able to see everything unfiltered. All right, so that's everything for the main database to begin with. We have many other things to add, but this is a pretty good starting point. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this view. And I'm going to make this, because there's no filters on it, there's no grouping on it, and the only thing I'm going to say is to sort by created time descending. So the most recent item that I created will show up at the top. This way, I have an unfiltered view, which I'm renaming, and I'm going to add the infinity symbol. This is what I do for my systems. Now I have an unfiltered view, so if I archive something and I need to quickly get it back, I can just pop over to the unfiltered view. It might make more sense in this view, honestly. Let's change this a little bit. Let's add a last edited time, and we can have both show here, but I'm not going to sort by created time. I'm going to sort descending by last edited time. So whatever items I most recently edited, those will show up at the top instead. Okay, we're going to leave those properties on in unfiltered, but back on our main table view, we don't need to see them anymore, so I'm going to hide them. So I'm going to just add a few sample items just to get this started. So we'll say buy milk. When I enter an item, I hit enter, and then I can hit shift enter on my keyboard to add a new item. I'll add mop floors. I'll add file paperwork. I'll add meal prep, and I'll add purchase office supplies. Okay, so let's go through here and let's set up some categorization, and then we're going to create our views, which are very straightforward. So let's add some areas. We're going to do personal, and we're going to do work. And then I'm going to edit these colors. For me, it's like subjects in school where science is red, and if science isn't red for you, you're wrong. And math is either black or blue. I will accept either. And then English is either or. I would typically say English is black and math is blue. Why? I couldn't tell you, but if you disagree with me, you're wrong. Social studies is green, obviously. So you can set these to whatever color you'd like. But I typically do blue for personal just because that's my color, and then green for work. If you have any other areas, you could obviously add them here. So buy milk, personal, mop floors, personal, file paperwork, work, meal prep, personal, purchase office supplies, work. And then if I wanted to add any tags, let's say I could do household. And these I like to set to the default. I just like to not have them be super colorful in this column because there's a lot. And trying to do any sort of system, I didn't want to be bothered. Like trying to make them rainbow, what a pain. So I just make them all the default. And then one other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to edit the property, and then I'm going to choose sort alphabetical so that these always show alphabetically in the list when I have multiple. So if I were to add fitness, it'll pop into the correct spot. This actually set as the gray. So again, got to remember to come back and hit default just so they're all the same. And then let's add maybe nutrition and see that popped in. I wish that you could set a default color. That's just not an option, but it's not that big of a deal to add properties. Okay, so we can add probably nutrition here. File paperwork probably doesn't need one. Meal prep would be nutrition. And then purchase office supplies probably doesn't need one. So now we have tags and areas set up, and we're going to add views that show each of those. So we'll start here with our main view. And actually, I'm going to call this main. And I'll give that a list icon. Then we're going to duplicate this view. Right-click, duplicate, and we'll rename this to area. And again, we'll use the folder icon for that. And then we're going to click here on the area property and choose group. So now all of my items will show grouped. And I can see all my work items and all my personal items. We'll come back to main, duplicate, and we'll say tags and choose the tag icon. And in this case, we'll choose group by tag. And then the only other thing we really want to do is set up our filters so that it hides things when they're done. So let's say we finished meal prep and we moved that to done. What we want to do in this case is filter that out so it goes away. Now, on the main view, what I like to do is group by status. So let's say we're going to do buy milk today. I can put that there, and that way these things start popping in a useful place. So what we know is that we don't want to see items that are marked as archived. So let's say we filed our paperwork and we're done and we know that that's archived. We don't want to see this group. Now, we could just hide the group, but the best thing to do is add a filter, and we're going to just do an advanced filter and say where status is not archived, resource, or canceled. I don't need to see any of those in this main view. Everything else I can see but that. Cool. Same thing. Now, I probably could have done this filter before I created these other views, but we're going to do the exact same filter, status, and actually let me add this to an advanced filter because you never know. I like to add it to an advanced filter typically because if you need to add more filter rules, which we are going to, it's helpful to have them here as opposed to just in those little pills. So we're going to say status is not archive, resource, canceled. Now in the tags view, we need to modify that a little. So we're going to do add to advanced filter where status is not, and we don't want to see archived and we don't want to see canceled, but we do want to see resource. This one will allow those resource items to stay in our view. So that way, if we have some fantastic, amazing online resource for work that we found and it's finance related, I'm just making things up here, obviously. You see that popped into the correct spot. It's finance related. We can set that to resource and it will go away out of our main views where we're actually doing work, but it will stay in our tags view. And then everything stays in our unfiltered view so I can see that item is last. And let's say I did archive an item, but I want to get it back more easily, but I need to get it back for some reason. I can go to unfiltered and change archive back to another status. All right, that's all I've got for you in this video. This is the bare bones skeleton. You can actually use this just as is if you wanted to do a basic system, but we're going to make this a lot fancier and more useful in the next video. Remember, if you want to download this, you can go to queryefficiency.com/todo. That's queryefficiency.com/TODO, and you can get everything there. So if you'd like to do that, head there. In part 2 of my How to Build a Notion to-do list series, we're going to build the core pieces that allow you to very easily answer that today or not today question. We're going to add the buttons to the database so that you're quickly able to move things throughout your system without having to think too much about it. And when we're done, you'll be able to process your list like I showed you very, very quickly and end with a crystal clear plan for the day's work. So if you're ready for that, I'll see you in part 2, which is on your screen right now.